My 8-year-old son Micah was in his 11th hour of open-heart surgery when my mother finally texted me. I lunged for my phone like a drowning woman grabbing a rope. The message said, "Hey honey, quick question. What's the Netflix password again? Your dad keeps getting locked out." I stared at that sentence until the letters blurred. 3 days later, my father followed up with a different request. He needed $9,000 by Friday for my younger brother's vision retreat in Tulum. I sent him exactly 1 penny through Zelle with a memo that read, "For his vision." Then I opened my laptop and started undoing 22 years of being the family ATM. If you've ever been the responsible one, the daughter who pays, the sister who fixes, the one everyone forgets to call back until they need something, stay with me. I want to tell you what happened the night I finally turned off the faucet. Drop a comment and let me know where you're watching from. I read every single one. I was sitting in a waiting room on the 4th floor of Lurie Children's Hospital in downtown Chicago. It was a Tuesday in late March, the kind of cold, gray morning where the wind off Lake Michigan goes right through your coat. The chairs were that industrial blue-gray vinyl that sticks to the backs of your thighs, even through jeans. There was a vending machine humming behind me and a TV mounted in the corner playing HGTV on mute. 2 other families had been there when I arrived at 4:30 in the morning. By hour 7, they were both gone. Their kids' procedures were over. They'd hugged surgeons, cried, walked down the hall to recovery. I watched them leave and I sat there alone. My son Micah was born with a congenital heart defect called tetralogy of Fallot. He'd had 2 surgeries already, one when he was 4 months old and another when he was 3. This was supposed to be the last one, a full repair. The surgeon, Dr. Aldridge, had told me it could take anywhere from 8 to 12 hours depending on what they found when they opened him up. I had texted my entire family 2 days before. My mom, my dad, my brother Drew, and Drew's fiancée Whitney. I'd written a careful, calm message because I didn't want to seem dramatic. Micah's surgery is Tuesday at 5 a.m. It's the big one. Could be all day. I'll be at Lurie. Anyone who wants to sit with me, the waiting room is on 4. I'd really love the company. My mother had replied with a single emoji of folded hands prayer. My father had sending good vibes, kiddo. He's a fighter. My brother hadn't responded at all. Whitney had liked my message with a little heart icon and then immediately posted a photo to Instagram of herself and Drew at a wine bar in River North with the caption, "Tuesday Energy, Whore Icon Building Our Empire." She'd tagged the location. It was 11 blocks from where I was sitting. I am 33 years old. I work as a fraud analyst for a regional credit union headquartered in Schaumburg. My job, in essence, is to look at patterns. I look at where money goes and where it shouldn't go. I look at who's taking from whom. I'm the person on the other end of the line when your card gets flagged at a gas station in Florida and you live in Ohio. I'm trained to see the shape of a betrayal before the person being betrayed can. That's important because for 2 decades I'd been looking at every single ledger except my own. By hour 8 in that waiting room, I had stopped pretending to read the magazine on my lap. My hands were ice cold. I kept replaying the morning. Micah in the pre-op gown, his little body so thin in the giant adult-sized hospital bed, asking me if the doctor was going to look like Iron Man. I'd told him yes. The doctor wears a special suit and everything. He'd smiled with that gap where his front teeth used to be. Then they wheeled him away and I sat down in that vinyl chair and I waited. That's when my coworker Priya walked in. I hadn't asked her to. I hadn't even told her which floor. She just showed up with 2 coffees and a paper bag from Stan's Donuts and said, "I'm not staying long, but I'm not letting you do this part alone." She sat with me for 2 hours. She didn't try to fill the silence. She just sat. When she left around noon, she hugged me hard and said, "Text me the second you hear. I'm taking the afternoon. Call me if you need me back." I sobbed in the bathroom after she left, partly from gratitude and partly from the brutal clarity of realizing that a woman I'd worked with for 4 years had shown up faster than my own mother. At 1 in the afternoon, the surgical nurse came out with a halfway update. They'd successfully closed the ventricular septal defect. The pulmonary valve replacement was about to start. Micah was stable. I texted my family group chat. "Halfway done. He's hanging in there." My mother replied, "Yay! Cry!" Quote, "Naimsi." My father replied, "Yay! Cry!" My father replied, "Auto boy." Drew read it and didn't respond. Whitney didn't respond. Then nothing. For 4 more hours, nothing. Around 4 in the afternoon, I scrolled Instagram out of pure boredom and self-punishment. Whitney had posted again. This time, she and Drew were at a rooftop on Randolph, the kind with heat lamps and $28 cocktails. The caption, planning sessions for the dream. Shh. Of Chulum is calling. There was a slide of a vision board, a beach, a drone shot of a villa, a printout of plane tickets. I want you to understand something. I had paid for Drew's car insurance for the last 6 years. I had paid for his gym membership. I was a primary on a credit card he and Whitney used for emergencies that had a recurring charge from a meal kit delivery service and a monthly subscription to a luxury candle company. I was the co-signer on the lease for the 2-bedroom in Lincoln Park where they lived. I'd taken over my parents' household utilities 4 years earlier when my dad got pushed into early retirement from his shipping logistics job and my mom's part-time hours at a Hallmark store got cut. I'd been telling myself it was temporary. I'd been telling myself that for a very long time. When Dr. Aldridge finally came out at 7:18 in the evening, his scrubs were dark at the collar and he looked like he hadn't blinked in a decade. He sat down next to me and said, "He did beautifully. The repair is clean. We're closing now. You can see him in recovery in about 40 minutes. I cried. I cried the kind of tears that don't make any sound, just water pouring out of my face like a leaky pipe. I texted the group chat. He's out. He's okay. The repair worked. 11 hours. I'm going to see him soon. My mother read it. My father read it. Drew read it. Whitney read it. Nobody responded. I sat with Micah in the pediatric ICU that night. He was so small under all those tubes. There was a chest tube draining into a clear plastic chamber and a ventilator breathing for him while his heart figured out its new rhythm. The nurse, a woman named Charlotte with a thick Wisconsin accent, sat with me for a while and told me about her own son who'd had the same surgery in 2009 and was now a freshman at UW-Madison studying engineering. She said it like a promise. I needed it like air. I slept 3 hours in the recliner that night. The next morning I called my office and told them I was using FMLA. My boss, who I will love forever for this, said, "Take the month. Don't even check your email. I'll handle it." When I hung up, I checked my phone. 47 unread messages. 2 were from the hospital billing department. 3 were from Priya checking in. The other 42 were from my mother, my father, my brother, and Whitney, sent across a span of about an hour, and they were not about Micah. The first one from my mother, sent at 8:14 a.m., said, "Honey, the cable went out. Is there an outage in your area? Your dad is missing his morning shows." The next one, 8:14 and 7:19 a.m., said, "Also Hulu won't load. Did you change anything?" Then my father, 8:31 a.m., said, "Whole streaming bundle is down on my end. Call me when you get a chance." Then Drew, 9:02 a.m., said, "Yo, did you cancel the card? Whitney just got declined at coffee meeting Weller investor super embarrassing fix it ASAP." Then Whitney, 9:07 a.m., said, "I think there's been a billing error on the credit card on file. Could you sort it out today? Drew and I have a deposit due for Tilem and we need the card working. Thanks." Shh. And then, the one that made me actually laugh out loud in the ICU hallway, from my father at 9:43 a.m., "Hey kiddo, hate to bother you with everything you've got going on, but your brother needs $9,000 for the Tulum thing. Mom and I are covering his flight. Whitney's parents won't help because they don't believe in giving handouts. Can you believe that? Anyway, deposit is due Friday. Just zell it to Drew. Daxo." I read that message 3 times. Then I read it a 4th time. I want you to understand that I had not been doing anything in their eyes. I had been sitting in a hospital while my son's chest was open. I had been watching strangers in masks restart his heart, and the only acknowledgement I had received was "Attaboy" and "Yay, Croned." And now this. Just dell it. I walked to the cafeteria. I bought a coffee I didn't drink. I sat at a corner table and I opened my banking app. I sent my father 1 cent. In the memo, I typed for his vision. I hit send. Then I sat there and felt the strangest feeling rise up in me. It wasn't anger. Anger I knew. Anger I had buried for 20 years. This was something colder and quieter. It was the feeling I get at work when I'm about to file a suspicious activity report. It's the feeling of a switch flipping from human being to analyst. The lights inside my head all came on at once, and I started to see the architecture of my life with terrifying clarity. I went back to Micah's room. He was sedated, sleeping, the monitor beeping steadily. I kissed his forehead. I told him I'd be back in 20 minutes. I asked Charlotte if she could keep an eye on him. She said of course. I took my laptop and I went to the family lounge at the end of the hall where there was a coffee machine and a couch and exactly 0 other people. I opened a fresh document. I called it Audit. I started listing every single financial entanglement I had with my family. I went line by line the way I do at work when I'm tracing a money trail. The cell phone plan, 5 lines, my name is primary, $812 a month, including the device payments on my parents' new iPhones I'd bought them for Christmas. The Verizon Fios bundle at their condo in Norwich, $194 a month, my card. The supplemental Medicare plan I quietly upgraded my mom to when her knee got bad, $268 a month, my card. The Amazon Prime household, the Costco executive membership, the Disney Plus bundle, the SiriusXM in my dad's truck, the Peloton subscription my mom hadn't used in 14 months. My card. My card. My card. My card. Then the bigger ones. The Chase Sapphire I was primary on with Drew and my parents as authorized users. Current balance, $19,400. I scrolled the recent charges. A $400 dinner at Maple and Ash. A $200 George at a med spa in Wicker Park. 3 Uber Eats deliveries in a single day. A $600 charge from somewhere called Sacred Soul Sound Bath. That last one had to be Whitney. Then the lease. The Lincoln Park 2-bedroom Drew and Whitney lived in. I was the cosigner. Rent was $3,400 a month, and twice in the last year I'd quietly covered it when Drew had a cash flow issue. Then the condo. My parents' 2-bedroom in Norwich. I wasn't on the deed, but I was on the mortgage as a cosigner from when they refinanced in 2019. The monthly payment came out of an account my dad and I both had access to, but I was the one funding it. I'd been paying their mortgage for almost 5 years. I sat there in that family lounge looking at the list and I felt something break inside me. Not in a sad way, in a clean way. Like a bone that had been set wrong for years, finally snapping back into place. I called the credit card company first. I closed the Sapphire, paid the balance in full from my emergency fund, which I had specifically built up for a year like this one. The rep tried to talk me into keeping it open for credit history reasons. I told her I'd take the hit. Account closed. Then I called Verizon. I separated my parents' lines and Drew's line from my plan and transferred liability to them. The agent told me my parents would need to call in within 30 days to set up their own account or service would be suspended. I told her that was fine. I removed my card from the bundle at their condo. I logged into Comcast and canceled the autopay on the Norwich address. I logged into the electric company ComEd and removed my card. Same with People's Gas. Same with the water billing. Same with their homeowners association dues. I logged into Netflix. I changed the password. I logged into Netflix. I changed the password. I logged into Hulu. Changed the password. Disney Plus password changed. Spotify family. I removed all 4 members and let it revert to my single account. Amazon Prime household. I revoked access for both my parents and my brother. I went into my Amazon settings and removed all of their shipping addresses from my account. I changed the password to that too. Costco. I called and downgraded from executive to gold and removed Drew's secondary card. The rep asked if I wanted to mail the new cards anywhere. I said only to my home address. I did all of this in about 90 minutes. I have a master password vault for work and I am extremely organized. When I was done, I sat back on that couch and I took the deepest breath I'd taken in maybe 10 years. Then I did one more thing. I am a fraud analyst. I have access at work to certain background services I'm not supposed to use for personal reasons. I am writing this knowing what I'm about to say. I used them anyway. I ran a search on Whitney. Her full name, her date of birth, which I knew from a family dinner where she'd made a big deal about being a Leo. What came back made me very, very still. Whitney had 2 prior names. She'd legally changed her name twice in the last 8 years. Under one of those prior names, she had a civil judgment in Cook County for $61,000 stemming from a personal coaching certification program that had been shut down by the Illinois Attorney General's office in 2021. Under another, she had a small claims judgment from a landlord in Wrigleyville. She had filed for Chapter 7 bankruptcy in 2022. She did not, contrary to what she told my family at Easter, have a master's degree from Northwestern. There was no Whitney by any of her 3 names in the Northwestern alumni directory. The boutique wellness consultancy she ran appeared to be a Squarespace site with a contact form and no listed clients. The Tillam Vision Retreat she'd been pushing my parents to fund. It wasn't a real retreat in the sense any of us would think. I found it on a sketchy Linktree. It was a pyramid structure mastermind run by a woman in Sedona who was being investigated by the FTC. The $9,000 wasn't a deposit on a vacation, it was a buy-in. My brother didn't know any of this, my parents didn't know any of this. They just knew that Whitney was beautiful and confident and called my mother Mama Bear and had told them that Drew was destined for greatness and just needed capital to unlock his potential. I printed everything to a PDF and saved it to an encrypted folder. Then I went back to Micah's room. The text messages by then had become voicemails, 6 of them from my mother escalating from confused to weepy to furious. One from my father telling me to stop being childish and to fix this nonsense before things get worse. One from Drew calling me a name I won't repeat on this channel. I did not respond. I sat with my son for the rest of the day. He woke up briefly around 4 in the afternoon, looked at me with his huge brown eyes and whispered, "Did the doctor have the suit on?" I told him yes. The doctor had the whole suit, and Micah smiled and went back to sleep, and I held his hand and cried. That evening, my mother called and I let it go to voicemail, and then I called her back. I put my earbuds in and I stepped into the hallway and I sat against the wall on the floor. She picked up on the half ring. Her voice was a screech. I will never forget. "What did you do?" "My phone won't work. The TV is off. Your father can't get into his email. Drew is losing his mind. What is wrong with you?" I said, "Hi, Mom." She kept going. "We're elderly. We're on a fixed income. You can't just rip everything away from us with no warning." I said, "Where were you yesterday?" There was a silence that stretched. She said, "What do you mean?" "We were sending good thoughts." "Where were you, Mom?" My voice was so calm it surprised me. When Doctor prized me, Aldridge came out at 7:18 and told me my son was alive. "Where were you? We didn't want to crowd you. You didn't call. You said you'd be busy. You didn't call." She started to cry. It was the cry she does when she's been caught. I know that cry. I've been hearing it since I was 7 years old, and she forgot to pick me up from a piano recital because she'd taken Drew to get ice cream. I let her cry. I did not fill the silence. After a long minute, she said, "Honey, please, the TV, the cable, just turn it back on. I'll talk to your father about the Tulum thing. I'll tell him no. Just, please, we can talk about all of this later." I said, "I'm not turning anything back on, Mom." She said, "But we can't afford," I said. "I know." She started yelling again. She yelled about how I'd always been the difficult one. She yelled about how Drew was sensitive and I'd never understood him. She yelled about how I was abandoning my family in their old age. I let her. When she ran out of steam, I said, "Mom, I have to go. The night nurse is doing rounds. I'm at the hospital with Micah, where I have been the entire time." I hung up. Then my father called. I picked up. He didn't yell. He did something worse. He used the voice he used when I was 16, and he was trying to talk me out of going to college out of state. The disappointed dad voice. The voice of a man who has decided he is sad about you. He said, "Kara, sweetheart, you're not thinking straight. You've had a stressful couple days. Let's talk this through. None of this needs to be permanent." I said, "Dad, you asked me for $9,000 while my son was in the ICU. He said, "Well, that was bad timing on my part. I'll admit that." "That wasn't bad timing, Dad. That was you not knowing he was in the ICU because you didn't ask." A long pause. "I knew he was having surgery, honey. You didn't call when it was over. I figured you'd call when you wanted to talk." I said, "Did you call your mother when I was born?" He didn't answer that. I said, "Dad, here's what's going to happen. I'm a co-signer on the condo. I've consulted with a real estate attorney. I had not yet, but I would, and he didn't know that. I'm going to be requesting a partition action to recover the equity I've contributed to the property since 2019. You and Mom should start thinking about your options. I'd suggest selling. The market in Norwich is actually pretty strong right now." The silence on the other end of the phone was a beautiful thing. He said, "You wouldn't." I said, "Dad, I have spreadsheets." I hung up. I did not hear from Drew for 2 days. When he finally surfaced, it was via a furious email sent at 1047 in the morning, full of typos, in which he accused me of being a jealous spinster. I am not a spinster. I am divorced and I am 33, and of trying to destroy his relationship out of spite. He demanded the credit card be reinstated. He demanded I cover the Tulum deposit. He said that if I didn't, Whitney was going to go public about how toxic I was. I did not respond to that email either. Instead, I waited. Micah was discharged 5 days after surgery. We came home to my little ranch house in Park Ridge. My mother had been there exactly once in the 8 years I'd owned it. Drew had never been. I tucked Micah into his own bed with his stuffed manatee, and I sat on the floor next to him until he fell asleep. Then I went to the kitchen and I poured myself a glass of cheap white wine and I waited. 2 days later, the doorbell rang. I knew who it was before I opened the door. Sure enough, there was Drew standing on my front step in a coat that I had paid for, and behind him, in a cream-colored wool coat that I had definitely seen Whitney post about on Instagram, was Whitney herself, with her hair done and her face doing the calm, sympathetic expression that I imagine she practiced in mirrors. Drew shoved past me into the foyer without being invited. Whitney followed, and her eyes did that thing I'd seen her do at my parents' house, the slow scan of the furniture, the art on the walls, the rug, the framed photos. Pricing it. Cataloging it. She said, "Kara, sweetie, we just want to talk." I crossed my arms. Talk. Drew said, "Look, I get it. You've been stressed. The Micah thing was a lot, but this has gone too far. Mom is having panic attacks. Dad's blood pressure is up. You need to put it all back." I said, "How's Micah, Drew?" He blinked. "What? Micah? Micah, my son, your nephew. He had open heart surgery a week ago. How is he?" Drew said, I'm sure he's fine. He's a tough kid. Look, can we focus? Whitney's been having a really hard time. She had to back out of the Tulum thing because of you, and her reputation in the wellness community is on the line. I looked at Whitney. Whitney smiled at me. It was the kind of smile a snake might offer right before. I said, "Whitney, quick question. How's your judgment with Banner Hill Property Management?" The smile slipped about a millimeter. I said, "Or your case with the Illinois AG, how's that going? Are you still using the name from before? Or is it a different one now?" Whitney said, "I have no idea what you're talking about." I walked to the kitchen counter. I picked up the manila folder I had been waiting all week to hand to my brother. I walked back. I held it out to him. I said, "Drew, before you give Mom and Dad $9,000 of their fixed income savings to send your fiancé to a Sedona mastermind run by a woman currently under FTC investigation, you might want to read this." He took the folder slowly. He opened it. He read the first page. His face changed. He read the second page. His face changed again. He looked up at Whitney. He said, "Babe, what is this? What is the second name? Whose name is that?" Whitney said, "It's a misunderstanding." He said, "It's a misunderstanding." He said, "There are 3 names, Whitney." She turned to me and the calm wellness mask was gone. Her face was something else entirely. She said, "You vindictive little, you ran a background check on me?" I said, "I run background checks for a living, Whitney. It's literally my job." "Did Drew tell you what I do?" Drew was still staring at the pages. I said, "He probably told you I work in banking. He likes to be vague about it because admitting that his sister is a fraud analyst at a credit union feels less impressive than implying she works on Wall Street, which I do not. But yes, I look at money and I look at people who lie about money. And you, Whitney, are not very good at it." Whitney made a sound that I think was supposed to be a laugh. She turned to Drew. "Are you going to let her talk to me like this?" Drew didn't look up from the folder. She said, Drew, babe, we need to leave." He said very quietly, "The bankruptcy." "Whitney, you told me your dad died and left you debt." Whitney said, "We are not doing this here." He looked up. His face was the face of a 30-year-old man who had just realized he was 12. He said, "My parents gave you $4,000 in October for business launch costs. Did you?" Whitney said, "Drew, get in the car." She turned to leave. At the door, she turned back to me and she said something I will not repeat on this channel, and she walked out and got into a ride share and was gone. Drew stood in my foyer holding the folder. He said, "Kara." I said, "Drew, go home." He said, "Kara." I said, "Drew, go home." He said, "I didn't." I said, "Go home, Drew." He went. I closed the door. I locked it. I leaned my forehead against the cool wood and I breathed. Micah called from his bedroom. "Mom." "Who was that?" I walked back to him. He was propped up on pillows, watching cartoons on the iPad with the volume low because loud sounds still hurt his chest where they'd cracked it open. I sat on the edge of his bed. I said, "Just your uncle, buddy. He's not going to bother us for a while." Micah said, "Okay." He paused. He said, "Mom, did Grandma come to the hospital?" The question caught me somewhere very tender. I looked at him for a long second. I am not going to lie to my son. not about the people who chose not to show up. I said, "No, baby, she didn't." He thought about that. He said, "That's mean." I said, "Yeah, it was." He nodded very seriously and went back to his cartoon. Here's what happened in the months after. My parents did not, in fact, lose the condo. They sold it. The market was good. After the mortgage was paid off and my portion of the equity returned to me, they walked away with about $30,000 and moved into a one-bedroom in a senior apartment complex in Des Plaines. My mother got a job at the front desk of a chiropractor's office. My father, for the first time in his adult life, learned how to set up his own utility account. Drew broke off the engagement with Whitney within a week of the folder incident. He moved back in with my parents, which was awkward for everyone, and got a job stocking shelves overnight at a Meijer in Niles. I saw him once at a Walgreens around Christmas. He was buying cold medicine. He looked at me. He nodded. He didn't say anything. I nodded back. That was the entire exchange. I felt almost nothing. A little sadness maybe, not for him. For the brother I'd imagined I had when I was a little girl. Whitney disappeared from social media. I'd be lying if I said I didn't occasionally check. I started therapy, real therapy, with a woman in Evanston who specialized in adult children of emotionally neglectful families. She used a phrase in our second session that I think about almost every day. She said, "You weren't the family bank. You were the family pressure valve." The reason none of them ever had to grow up is because every time the pressure got too high, you released it for them. I cried for 40 minutes in her office. She told me that was fine. She told me I had a lot of pressure to release. My boss at the credit union called me into her office about a month after I came back from leave. She said, "I noticed a personal background check ping on the system, run on a non-member, around the time of your son's surgery." My stomach dropped. She looked at me for a long moment. Then she said, "I'm not going to write you up. But don't ever do that again. Talk to me first next time." I said, "There won't be a next time." I meant it. Micah recovered like a champion. By the end of the summer, he was running again. He's 9 now. He plays soccer on Saturdays. He wants to be an engineer or a paleontologist, depending on the week. His scar is a thin pink line down the middle of his chest, fading every year. He calls it his racing stripe. This past spring, we used the money I would have spent on my parents' utilities, my brother's car insurance, my brother's gym, my brother's emergency credit card, my mother's Peloton, my father's Sirius XM, and 1,000 other quiet bleeds, and we took a trip. Just the two of us. We went to Glacier National Park. We stayed in a little cabin with a view of Lake McDonald. On the second morning, Micah climbed up on a big rock at the edge of the water and put his hands on his hips like a tiny superhero and yelled, "I have a new H, and I am the king of Montana." A family eating breakfast at a nearby picnic table started clapping for him. He bowed. I sat on that rocky beach and I watched my son, who is alive, who has a strong, steady heartbeat, who is loud and silly and rude and wonderful, and I thought about that vinyl chair in the waiting room. I thought about Priya bringing me coffee. I thought about all the people who had shown up, and all the people I had been programmed since childhood to keep showing up for, who had not. The hardest thing I had to learn, and I'm still learning it, is that being a good person and being an endlessly available person are not the same thing. I was raised to believe they were. I was raised by people who profited from me believing they were. The day I stopped believing it, my life cracked open like Micah's chest, and something new started to beat inside it. If you've been the family ATM, the responsible one, the daughter who pays, I want you to hear me say this. You are allowed to close the account. You are allowed to be the analyst of your own life. You are allowed to be the ledger, see what's been taken, and decide that the balance is closed. I read every comment. Tell me where you're watching from. Tell me your story. I'll be right here. I think about that vinyl chair on the 4th floor of Lurie Children's almost every week. Not because of the pain of sitting in it, but because of what I finally understood while I was sitting there. The 11 hours my son Micah spent in surgery were the hours my whole life stopped pretending. Everything I had been telling myself about love, about loyalty, about what a good daughter looks like, it all collapsed in that quiet waiting room. And in its place, a much harder, much truer understanding started to grow. I used to believe that love meant making yourself useful, that if I just paid one more bill, covered one more mistake, said yes one more time, my parents would finally see me. Drew would finally grow up. The family would finally become the family I had imagined as a child. But cause and effect do not bend around our wishes. When you reward someone for taking, they will keep taking. When you teach people that your boundaries are negotiable, they stop hearing the word no. My parents did not call during Micah's surgery because for 22 years I had trained them not to. I had been so available, so reliable, so quietly competent that my absence had become impossible for them to imagine. They forgot I was a person because I had spent my whole life acting like a service. The clarity I felt in that family lounge with my laptop open was not cruelty. It was the simple math of a life that no longer added up. A fraud analyst learns to read the ledger. I had been refusing to read my own. Once I looked at it honestly, I saw what I owed myself, and I saw what I owed myself, and I saw what I had been paying in interest for 2 decades. There is a kind of strength that has nothing to do with anger. It is the strength of being willing to disappoint the people who built their lives on your silence. That strength is harder to find than fury, and far more useful. Drew did not lose Whitney because I was vindictive. He lost her because the truth was always going to surface, and I simply chose not to keep it submerged anymore. My parents did not lose the condo because I was cold. They lost it because they had never planned for a life in which I was not paying for it. If you are the responsible one, hear me out. Being decent is not the same as being depleted. Wisdom is knowing the difference between a person who needs your help and a person who needs your boundaries. Courage is closing the account even when your hands are shaking. And dignity, real dignity, is sitting with a child in a hospital room and deciding that the next 20 years of your life are not going to look like the last 20. Micah has a scar down the middle of his chest. He calls his racing stripe. I have one too, just not where anyone can see it. We are both stronger for what cracked us open. And the heart that started beating in me, the day I sent that 1 penny, is the truest one I have ever had.